Welcome once again, everyone, to the final video for manual transmission vehicles, which is titled Real Life Driving Part 2. Now, the last video ended with me promising that we'd start by talking about starting off from a dead stop on a hill, or worse, a steep hill. So let's do that. Now, in every one of the videos on learning how to drive a manual transmission vehicle, we've talked about the importance of staying calm a lot, and that's because it is vital to a successful start on a hill. I cannot stress this enough. And one of the simplest things that I found helped to keep my students' nerves in check was a simple addition of a large sign on the back of their vehicle, like this one here. And it's simple to do. Just find some poster board at your local dollar store and a big felt pen, and Bob's your uncle, or Sherry's your auntie. But here's an important FYI that you'll want to pay close attention to. You'll need to watch what you use to attach the sign. If you have a trunk, attach a string and tie the string inside the trunk, so when you close the trunk, the sign is visible. Or maybe use strong magnets on the outside of your vehicle. But if you end up using tape, be certain that it will come off easily. And I wouldn't leave it on past that lesson, even if you plan to drive again the next day, because you really don't want to allow the adhesive on the tape to cook onto your paint. Okay, getting back to hill starts. So you want to stick with the usual plan of finding your friction point, but make sure it is really vibrating before you start to come off the brake pedal and move over to the gas pedal. And then there's the tricky part. Trying your best not to panic if you feel your vehicle starts to roll back, because even the tiniest little rollback feels like you're rolling a lot. So the best thing you can do is to just completely ignore the rollback and put all of your attention into your pedal use, holding the friction point in place while you take the time to make sure you hear a decent roar coming from your engine before you continue coming off your clutch any further. Now, as you start learning, the amount of gas that you give will probably be way too much, and that's okay, because as you'll figure out in your first few lessons, when you're starting off, it's the clutch that really controls the speed, not the gas pedal. All the gas is doing is feeding the engine to stop your vehicle from stalling, and you're not moving an inch until you start coming off the clutch, no matter how much gas you've given it. Now, when you hear that engine roar, it doesn't mean you're going to peel out in a cloud of smoke and take off like crazy, like you think you might. No, that's not going to happen. In fact, it's much better to over-rev your vehicle when you're learning to drive than it is to have it stall. So really fight the urge to come off the gas when you hear that big roar coming from your engine. I mean, if you're still over-revving 4 weeks from now, well, worry about it then. But for now, let it go. So just stick with the game plan of being really slow and smooth and steady while you try your best to match the same pressure that you come off the clutch with the same pressure that you put on the gas pedal. Now, when it comes to super steep hills, unless you live in a very hilly, mountainous area, you shouldn't come across them too often, but you still need to know how to deal with them. Now, having said that, when I'm driving, if I know that there's a really steep hill where I would have to start from a dead stop, I would just alter my route if possible so that I didn't have to start on that hill, which is really easy to do these days, especially with things like GPS and maps on our phones. Now, some people will say that I shouldn't do this, that I should keep my skills up, yada yada, but being in the driver safety business, common sense tells me that every time I don't have to start up a super steep hill, the better the odds that I won't have any problems, especially because the problem doesn't have to be caused by me. So those are odds I can live with. But the way that I do keep up my skills, and what I promote for you to do as well, is anytime I own a manual transmission vehicle, I take some time every few months, which I put right in my schedule so it doesn't fall by the wayside, and I find a few quiet hill areas that are different grades, and I practice for a while. That's how I keep my skills up. Now, I believe that everyone should be able to start up all types of hills without using what I call the handbrake hack. Because what if you don't have a working handbrake because it's broken? Or worse, it just broke, and now what are you going to do? You've got to start up that hill. But having said this, let's go ahead and learn the handbrake hack just so that you have it in your toolbox of tricks. Now, before we get started, I just want to mention that we live in a great big world, so I would check with wherever you have to go for your road test to see what their policy is on using the handbrake during hill starts, and look into it nice and early so that you can have as much practice time as possible if needed. Okay, so let's get started. Now, as you can see here, the person is pressing the button in that's located at the end of the handbrake. Now, this button is basically a locking mechanism, so whatever position you pull the handbrake up into or downwards towards, once you let go of this button, the handbrake will lock in that position. So the most important thing that you must do when using the handbrake hack is always keep this button pressed in the whole time, always. Now first, you're going to pull the handbrake up as far as it comfortably wants to go. But just be aware, you're not trying to yank it up as far as it'll possibly go. No, don't do that. Just pull it up comfortably until you feel a decent amount of resistance as you're pulling up. Now at this point, you want to do a little test to see if you've pulled the handbrake up far enough that it will hold your vehicle in place. And try to think of this as a kind of fun exercise where your handbrake is more like a joystick for a video game. And as you release a little bit of pressure off of your brake pedal, if you start to feel your vehicle rolling back, well, you're already posed and ready on the handbrake, so just make a game of how smooth you can bring up that handbrake and stop the roll so your vehicle is staying in place. Now, just to be crystal clear, when you start to come off your foot brake and you feel your vehicle starts to roll back, don't change anything with the foot brake pedal. Leave your foot right where it is. Don't push the pedal back down. Then, as you maintain your foot position, start playing with your handbrake until your vehicle stops rolling back. Now, the key phrase here is stops rolling back. And now that you're aware this will happen, and since knowledge is always the key to success, let this knowledge guide you into what focus is needed where. Because otherwise, if you panic and push your brake pedal back in, you're right back at square one in the same position where you started from, not knowing if your handbrake has been pulled up far enough to stop your vehicle from rolling back. Okay, let's sum up how everything goes together for a perfect hill start when we incorporate the handbrake hack. So you'll start by pulling your handbrake up until you feel some resistance, and you'll hold it there with the button pressed in the whole time. Then you'll find your friction point and start coming off the brake pedal to see if you roll back or not. And then, if need be, you'll pull up a little more on the handbrake until you're completely off the foot brake and you've moved over to the gas pedal. Then once you hear a nice decent roar from the engine, at that point you'll balance coming off the clutch with adding more gas until you're off and running. And then you'll finish up by putting your shifting hand back on the steering wheel until it's time to shift up into second gear. And then once you've decided that you need to shift, make sure you really get up there with the revs, since your RPMs will usually drop a fair bit when you go to shift up into the next gear. So by pushing your revs before the shift, you're making up for that. But if you lose too many RPMs as you attempt to shift, then don't even hesitate. Just go back into the lower gear and get your revs back up, and then try to shift again when you're ready. Now, when you're starting off down a steep hill, you can start in second gear since you're going to gain speed much faster than usual. So come off the brake, which will immediately get your vehicle rolling, and then start to come off the clutch, nice and slow and smooth, until you're completely off the clutch. But I wouldn't do this on your road test, just in case your examiner doesn't understand what you're doing. Now, when it comes to intersections, there is no shifting in intersections. Instead, you'll want to focus on your seeing habits and steering control throughout the turn. So you'll start off in first gear, and then once your vehicle is now straight in the new lane that you've turned into, then at that point, you can now shift into second gear. So you want to practice using just the right amount of gas so that you can get through the turn without really over-revving your engine. And this is very important for your road test. And with that said, I think we're done. Now, not only have we ended this section in the Getting Started series, but we've ended the whole series. Happy touchdown dance we do! So I'll say goodbye for now, and then when you're ready, I'll see you over at the Side Street Driving series, which is where we start to get serious about this learning business, starting with the first section, which is all about seeing habits. Alrighty, so take care and stay safe. Now, I'm starting to get a decent amount of people watching these videos, which is wonderful, but there's been barely any subscribers, likes, or comments being written, which is the only way you can get better results through YouTube. So if you think it's worthwhile to keep these videos going, I really need your help, guys. Okay, lecture over, go have fun.